Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Home Furnishings Association webinar, which is Driving Results with Sales Processes and Planning. It's part two of our sales management series. So hopefully you're able to join us 2 weeks ago. We had incredible content and talked a lot about how to find sales talent. Today we're going to be diving more into the operational side of leading a high-performing sales team. I'm Shannon Williams. I'm HFA's CEO, and I'm going to be your host for today's webinar. What we all know is that a successful sales team really doesn't happen by chance. We have to really build it on a well-structured process. We've got to build a system and a strategy that helps enable long-term success. We don't just hit a goal. We're doing it over and over again. So that's what we're here to talk about today. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes. This webinar is recorded and available on demand at myhfa.org/webinar. So go back, watch it, put it in your arsenal of tools, and keep it handy as you continue to address this issue. If you have any questions, that Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, there's some great emojis in there, but throw your questions in there. We're going to get to as many of them as time allows. We structure our entire webinar based off of the questions that come in, and to the person who asked the question to get this started, how much would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? We may or may not be addressing that today, but whatever questions you have come up, please drop them in the chat below. And I do want to thank Synchrony, who is our education thought leadership sponsor. They are the reason we can have these and continue to invest in educating the whole industry and make it easy to learn and get better. But this webinar has an Ignite code, and there's 1,000 Ignite points, and you hang in there, watch to the end, and we will reveal that code at the very end so that you can get those points and get yourself some really cool stuff. So let's meet today's webinar panelists. We have Jody Sievert, who is the owner of One by One Companies. She is a renowned sales trainer in the home furnishings and interior design industries, and she has a proven track record of helping retailers achieve double-digit revenue growth through strategic sales training, which everybody needs right now. So thank you, Jody, and welcome. Rob Ball is the sales trainer at the HFA Sales Academy, and he's a seasoned expert, and he has literally spent his entire career and childhood in the home furnishings business. He currently has more than 26 retail locations, and he is the driving force behind HFA Sales Academy, which was built because retailers need sales training that is not available on today's mass market. So, Rob, thank you. Welcome. And Michael Lewis is the Senior Sales Training Manager for Levin Furniture, and he oversees sales training for about 30 locations throughout the Northeast Ohio and Southwest Pennsylvania markets. Michael is dedicated to developing high-performance sales teams and maximizing sales results. Michael, so glad you're making your HFA webinar debut, and
Thank you.
so grateful for the work that you do, because I think you have one of the most challenging jobs within this industry, and can't wait to have some good information we extract. So let's jump right in. Let's start by talking a little bit about the foundations and the success of having a successful sales team, which is the process. Obviously, we know that a well-structured process not only gets the customer journey, but it also helps sales managers maintain consistency. So, Jody, let me start with you. What are some of the key components of a well-structured sales process, and really, how can retailers identify any areas that need to improve?
Well, in terms of any areas that need to improve would be sort of part of an overall sales training and performance program, which would be to measure what they're doing and what they're producing. And to have look, all sales programs have some of the same stuff, preparation, connection, discovery questions, that. And so to have one that's consistent, that really aligns with what the values and culture of the organization are and what the customer relationship experiences that they're looking to create, and have all of those work together. And as you said, to build consistency so that it's easier to coach and train when it's all the same and everyone's wearing the same jersey, that it's all the same philosophy and activity that we're looking to measure and observe.
Can you highlight some of the components of that sales process? Can you break it down? I know some people like a 5-step process, some like a 7, you like a 4-step.
Yeah, I have 7, but so it's prepare, connect, ask discovery questions, present a solution, handle objections, get a commitment, whether it's a sale or an appointment, and follow up. Everyone's got a little bit of, I think everyone's got something that's similar to that. I don't know. Would you agree, Rob?
Yeah, 100%, Jody. I think foundationally it starts with three key metrics, right? The first one's going to be opportunities. The second one's going to be your closing percentage, and your last one's going to be your average sale. This is how every single business on planet Earth, it doesn't matter what business it is, car sales, Starbucks, furniture stores, all do the exact same thing. They have to categorize how many people they have coming through the door, what the average transaction value is going to be, and what their close rate is on those individuals. And so I think one thing as an industry that we have to focus on is making our sales associates understand the why behind all of these KPIs. I know coming up in the furniture industry, I had no idea what a KPI was. That's a key performance indicator in case anybody's wondering. And so, what really drives the business forward is those three KPIs, the opportunities, and making your sales associates realize that they're in control of driving the opportunities through the door. This isn't just the marketing department anymore. This isn't just the CEO or the ad department, whatever it is. It's your job. As a seasoned sales pro, you got to drive traffic through the door. The second thing is going to be your close rate. If you have two sales associates, I've said this on webinars in the past, you have two sales associates selling $10,000 a week, let's say in sales. Well, the next metric, to kind of separate them, well, how many customers did it take sales associate A to reach $10,000 in sales for the week? And how many customers did it take sales associate B? And then obviously the last metric is going to be average sales. This is something that all of our sales associates can influence through different strategies. So, and I apologize, I'm a little sick. So if I get into a coughing fit, somebody please save me. But our sales process very simple, very similar to Jody's. Like Jody said before, sales is sales. Doesn't matter really what industry you're in, but having a well thought out process around what the sales associates are supposed to be doing when, where, why, and how is extremely important to any type of dynamic of a successful sales team. Think about the Ford Motor Company. They had an assembly line. Why? Because it really was the blueprint and breadcrumbs to success. Our sales process is great. We reapproach the customer because we're going to get customers that say just looking, right? We're going to discover, to Jody's point, what the customer's looking for. We're going to ask the customer those discovery questions. We're going to present the product in a meaningful way, utilizing features and benefits. We're going to do a trial, close, follow up, and follow through at a high level. That's what our sales associates need to be doing. But as an industry, I feel like our advertising department does 90% of the heavy lifting. And so a well-structured sales environment teaches your sales associates not only how to interact with your advertising, but what happens once that customer's in the door is that we have to show value that the advertising department can't do for us. And so that's why it's so important to have that well-structured, sales performance metrics in place and process.
That's
The
great.
only thing I might add to what Jody and Rob said so very well, like Jody said, everybody basically has a similar version. You can't really recreate the wheel. If anyone on the call has not come to a formal sales process yet, kind of like Rob said, you have to identify what a successful sale looks like from beginning to end. You have to verbalize it in a simple enough way that you can easily teach it, easily observe it, and easily follow up and coach to it. We subscribe to a 5-step process. Jody has a 7. Sounded like Rob has a 5 as well. I think you can't really be less than 4 steps, and 7 seems to be about the upper end. But anyone that still needs to create one, start by deciding what the most successful sale process would look like, divvy it up into steps, verbalize it as simple as possible, and then begin to teach it from the top down so that everybody knows it backwards, forwards, in their sleep, and can then model their talents to it. If you have the process, it's basically a skeleton of what you need to do, but then there's a certain amount of sales that's performance art. Having that structure allows you to more easily perform your art because you know where you're going from step to step. You know what maybe you missed or what you need to add to. But it's the simplest thing on earth and yet also a complicated thing, because where the rubber meets the road is where you get involved with different personalities and different conversation structures.
That's super informative and brings me to a really important next question, which is, with those personalities, how do you, Michael, maintain consistency across multiple locations when team sizes and personalities and customer demographics differ? How do you find that consistency and consistently reinforce it?
I think it starts at the most base level, kind of like I said before, the KISS method. Keep it simple. I won't say the rest, but make it as simple as possible so that it can be as uniform as possible. You leave space for different levels of skill, different types of personalities, but you make sure that everyone has it modeled for them at sort of the most skillful and yet simplistic version of it, so that you can go out and do stand-up practice and model it for folks. And again, you start from the top down. You make sure to begin with that the leaders in each one of your stores know it, know the optimal version of it, and then you kind of leave it to them to allow for the idiosyncrasies and the different flex points for each sales rep. Some are more outgoing, some are more introverted, some are more detail oriented, some are more, tugging on heartstrings and tickling people emotionally. But you have to have a very rock solid program in place that everyone knows. And then it's that much easier to observe it, in breathing motion per store and make the changes where you need to. I think if it is structured well, it survives any and all. This is a different customer base. This is a different type of salesperson. This is a different store size, store setup, whatever the case may be. It will survive all of those things once you've identified sort of what the right kind of sale looks like. You can put the basics down, you can build the foundation and allow people to sort of, ad lib where needed or call an audible, but they're still doing the thing the way it's intended.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying there, Michael. I think it comes down, for me, at least from my experience, it boils down to one word, and that's accountability. Coming up in my career, I remember a lot of people saying, Rob, I just got to hold you accountable. And as I was a sales associate working at various different furniture stores, I used to hate that word. It was like a dirty word, hold me accountable like I'm some child or whatever it was, until somebody broke it down to me in a quite different manner. What am I holding my sales associates accountable to? And when you ask them that question, excuse me, you ask them that question, they're going to say, well, you're holding me accountable to things you want me to do. And this is plain and simple not the case. What I'm holding my sales associates accountable to is a proven system to drive success to that sales associate. Because at the end of the day, the best, and I think we can all agree upon this on this call, the best form of payment is going to be a commission, because you kind of, you eat what you kill, so to speak. And so the accountability side of things is a super important aspect of what we're doing, because I'm holding my sales associates accountable to what they promised me during the job interview, which is that they were going to be successful individuals. And so you have a process. The process works because our top sales associates work this process every single day and provide us with the metrics showing us that, hey, here's their sales. They sell 100 grand a month. They sell $1 million every year for 10 years. What do they do? Let's try to duplicate that effort. To Michael's point, yes, there's going to be different personality types, but we're all human beings. And for the most part, we're all going to fit within the same confines of a sales funnel to a degree. And so we start with why. We teach them why this process is super important. Why do we greet? Why do we reapproach? Why do we follow through with customers? We show them the data. We show them the metrics, and then we hold them accountable to success. And that's what a good sales manager does, is that they pay attention to the details of what their sales associates are doing every day. And it takes 90 days at a minimum to get a sales associate to really and truly embody a new process. And so the commitment level from leadership and from a sales manager needs to be, hey, listen, let's just say I'm working with Michael on this deal. Michael, you're a fantastic person. You embody everything that our company, wants to be, right? You share our core values, your core principles, but we're not hitting our sales metrics. Here's what I'm going to do. Michael, I care about you. I want to work with you for the next 90 days. And we're going to go through this process every single day. And we're going to have sit downs every day that's possible to go over the progress of where we're at. The reason why a lot of these big weight loss companies were super successful is because the accountability factor behind them. You'd go in and you'd get weighed in. Pardon me, and you'd never want to weigh in more than what you were the week before. The sales associate's the same thing. They want to provide you, if you're putting your heart and soul into that sales associate, they're going to want to provide you with that feedback and those results that are commensurate with the efforts you're putting into them. And so accountability, in my opinion, is the number one thing that we as sales managers need to do to make sure our sales associates are following the process and hitting the desired results. I don't think of a single time in my entire career where I've had a manager or an owner of a business hold me accountable to something, I had a good result and I was upset about it. And so I think we have to change the moniker around, or at least the ideology around, what holding people accountable is, and making sure we're doing it from a place of our heart as opposed to just trying to assert our authority over an individual. But I think accountability is the number one thing that makes any sales process work.
I love so much that you're referring to that. One of the things we were talking about, I believe it was on our last webinar about sales management, is that relationship where someone says, I do this, so just hold me accountable. And I recall like a time in my career where I said to somebody, when I said, you know what, here's the thing. This is your business and this is your career. You hold yourself accountable. I'm here to support you, and we're going to work through that and have some consistency to it. But if you're not committed for yourself to be accountable, then this dynamic, if you're relying on me, the dependence is not going to create that bigger dynamic. Rob, you talk about sitting people down. So let's talk about the consistency of a well-structured sales process. Like when you're talking about um, sitting people down and going through the sales process, how do you like what are components within that training? How do you ensure that sales managers, if I'm a sales manager listening right now, how can I really make sure that I'm effective and I'm reinforcing the process, and what does that day-to-day look like with those sit downs?
Couple things. I'm going to get into that 2 seconds. So something you just said a second ago. Inky Johnson has a quote where he says, "Hold my courage until you're strong enough to carry your own." And so accountability is the same thing. So for me, I'm going to be accountable for you until you can hold yourself accountable. That's my job as a leader in this business, because a lot of these individuals, they come into this environment and they're kind of like, okay, well, you know what? I can sell, but I don't know a lot about this. There's a lot of uncertainty. My job as a sales manager to provide that sales associate with as much certainty around what they do as possible, because I am solely responsible for their success. And that's the heart that I put into it. And so, yes, there's an inflection point between doing too much for them and them relying too much on you. And so that's that. Sitting down, so it goes back to what Michael and Jody were saying before. A well thought out and a well described process is of the utmost importance, right? But on the accountability side, your sales associates need to be looking at and monitoring all of those key KPIs, right? Those key performance indicators, how many opportunities come through the door, what their closing ratio is, what their average sale is. Typically, we can provide them with their average sale based upon, our point of sale system. But for the most part, the close and opportunities are something that we need to be provided by, unless you have a traffic count or whatever. But even those, for the most part, have some level of ambiguity, right? You gotta rifle in on it. For me, the opportunities is probably the most important thing. And so, what a sales associate that wants to get better in this business needs to be doing is writing down every opportunity that comes through the door and cataloging what is happening. Best place to put it's a CRM. If you're utilizing a CRM, it's absolutely the best place to put it. I greet a customer. I greet the customer. The customer's name is Jody. Fantastic. She lives, 5 miles within 5 miles of the store. She's looking for a living room set. I'm logging every bit of that information, but I'm going to log whether or not Jody told me that she was just looking off the door. Because if I can get 10 customers in a row saying just looking, well, what does that mean? For the most part, that means that I probably have an issue with my greeting, potentially, right? And of those 10 customers, how many customers am I reapproaching? Well, it should be 100%, but if it's only five, well, guess what? My real true opportunities are half as much as what I'm actually recognizing. So the data from the sales associate is super important. And again, the reason why they're showing us the data, it's not to say, hey, I'm not that great of a salesperson. It's to, hey, listen, sales manager, you've been in my shoes before. You're a leader in the industry. Here's my data. How can I get better? Because at the end of the day, every person, if you're going to spend 8 to 10 hours a day on the showroom floor of a furniture store, you want to make it as productive as possible, because that's how you eat. That's how you earn your money. And so I have to explain that to the sales associates on and early. Like, you're not going to impress me with, showing me that you close 50% of your sales, but you have a super low average sale, or your sales don't match what the numbers are. What you're going to impress me is by saying, listen, I had 10 people through the door today. I only closed one. What am I doing wrong? And I'm going to say, hey, I'm so proud of you for even saying that to me. Let's work together on it. Let's see the way you're greeting. Let's see how you're presenting product. Let's see what your trial close looks like. Let's see if you're asking for the sale in a meaningful way. How are you using financing? But it's really being that partner in the process to help them kind of check all the boxes and to get them into a better position.
If I could add something, a phrase that Rob used earlier about accountability, and I'll be accountable for you for the first 90 days, then you can be accountable to yourself. Again, taking it back to sort of building blocks, it is immensely important for the sales managers that are out there that will be holding people accountable, that you build the rapport with your associate, you model the behaviors for them. They see that you can, in fact, walk the walk, not just talk the talk. and you have a formalized system for observing them, for jumping in the side cell with them, for taking TOs, for facilitating TOs. TO stands for turnover, if anyone doesn't know. But once they see that you are in fact helping them to kill something they can eat, as Rob said, I always say sing for their supper. That builds a lot of rapport, that builds a lot of trust in the relationship. And then you need to make sure that you're observing each sales associate as often as possible throughout the week, having quick coaching sessions, having quick follow-up and check-in sessions, and then have a more formalized, a bit more of a bigger breakdown, if not weekly, at least monthly, and then again quarterly, so that you're following a certain progression. But you have to have that inbuilt trust, and you have to have proven that you can walk the walk, so that when you try to hold them accountable, it carries weight, it carries merit. They believe that the advice you're giving, that the KPIs you're talking about are with the best interest in mind, AKA so that they can make the most money, so that they can be as successful as possible. You do have to be kind of regimented in it. As a sales manager, you need to dedicate probably 65 to 70% of your day to your floor. If your floor is not performing the way that you need it to, and you're not out there trying to see exactly what's going on and impact it as much as possible by being present, you're missing a really big piece. And again, when you try to hold someone accountable, it will fall flat. It will be a bit hollow. On top of that, if you are holding someone accountable, you can't just talk about numbers. You must always talk about the behaviors that support those numbers. Or again, you'll damage trust and you'll damage the weight that your words carry. An example that I've unfortunately seen, an example that I've been a party to, and I'm sure everyone on this call has been, is when a sales manager says to an associate, hey, your finance percentage was bad last month, you need to do better. And that's the end of the conversation, as opposed, let's talk through how that looks, how that sounds, what you're doing now, where maybe some things could be improved upon, always from a place of caring, of being accountable yourself while you hold them accountable.
Jody, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah. When in my sales management training, I take the my sales training program, and I break it into 3 categories. And it's similar to what the gentleman is saying. That one is that as a salesperson, you need to be able to demonstrate every element and model the behavior that you want them to be doing. They got to see that you actually know how to do it in a variety of situations. I mean, whether it's taking it up, or I'm gonna say, Michael, I'm taking the next one where I just want you to watch. I know you're working on discovery questions. I want you to watch me do that, to be an observer of what we're able to demonstrate, as well as to observe what they are doing. So that's, as a salesperson, how does the sales process get executed? 2, as a coach, what are the actions associated with improving that particular step or skill? So that if someone is struggling with, I don't know, let's say close ratio. So where am I going to look in connecting to find a behavior that might be missing? What are the discovery questions that are probably not happening or not happening effectively that are going to impact their close ratio? Where is their presentation not compelling or making it easy for the buyer to say yes? Like, what are the things that I'm looking for, especially when you have a program for them to follow? Like, what are the things that I'm looking for to coach them from the program that are missing from what they're doing or not effectively being executed? But the third part is where I find the gold is. And that's where I look at, how is your sales training program an operating system? And what I mean by that, and this is, so like, stay with me on this. How is it an operating system? So if I'm teaching rapport building skills like voice and body match or identifying and adapting to DISC, how am I using those skills as a leader with my team? Like, if I'm going into a one-on-one coaching meeting, especially with a delicate conversation, am I practicing voice and body match? Am I understanding what their DISC style is? So if I'm a dominant going into a one-on-one meeting, especially about performance, and they're a steady, I'm not going to bring this person with me. I'm going to adapt to their style so that I can create enough of a connection to have a difficult conversation. If they come up to me and say, I don't think I need to be sketching, I think it takes too long, that's an objection. I need to use the process to manage it as an objection, so that in the third column as an operating system, I'm using my sales training program, anyone using the sales training program to execute with your customers who are your salespeople. They're your internal customers. So how am I using it as a communication tool, not just as a selling tool, so that it's a complete circle philosophically, culturally, effectively, productively, to make it live everywhere? Be the example everywhere you can be, so that they get, this is not going away. You can't hide from it. It's part of who we are.
You're muted, Shannon.
Sorry, I'm also getting the voice tickles in my throat, so I'm trying to go off camera or off mic. So one of the questions that I have is, Rob, you're talking, like, I love that you talk about the mirror me, watch me. Can we talk about the salesperson dreaded role play and how that factors into sales training and ongoing development?
I hate it too, guys. Listen, I mean, I've been doing it my entire career. It's still awkward for me. It's never not going to be awkward, but again, the more you role play, the better your game gets, right? I mean, it's just like Mariano Rivera. I use him as a baseball player. You know, he threw an amazing cut fastball. Everybody knew exactly what he was going to do before he did it. He stood on that mound, enter Sandman, the whole 9 yards. He went there, he threw the first pitch. What was it going to be? Cut fastball. It was either going to be that or a fastball. Everybody knew what was going on, but nobody can hit it. And so sales is exactly the same thing, except, slightly in reverse. You want to practice as much as possible so that way your speech, your presentation, your close can hit on the field. And so I'd rather practice 1,000 times with, a coworker and have it be slightly awkward than to practice one time in front of a live customer, have it be awkward and not make any money, right? And so at the end of the day, the goal is this. We're trying to make meaningful relationships with our customers to build a lot of value in our communities and provide for our families. And so, unfortunately, a part of that piece is that you're going to have to practice what you're doing. And so, you have two phenomenal sales professionals here, and Michael and Jody. They've been doing this for a very long time. They're very eloquent in what they say. Do you guys all think, all the sales associates watching this right now, do you think that they just woke up this morning and said, you know what, I'm going to do a presentation on sales? No, they did not do that. They practiced this for years and years and years and decades, really, in order to become this eloquent in the way that they speak about their processes and what happens in their stores and their businesses. The same thing happens in our environment. Without a relentless amount of practice and preparation, do we really become the true professional, right? And so I think role playing is a necessary evil. It's not the funnest thing to do, but a really good sales manager, to Michael's point, they're going to walk the walk and talk the talk. And they really should be the ones that kind of spearhead and are the tip of the spear when it comes to role playing. And to make it less awkward, make it fun. Let's come up with, so some of the best, I was taught this years ago, some of the best salespeople in the world actually go to improv classes. Okay, so I'm not sure if you guys watch, I think it's Million Dollar Listing, Ryan Serhant. He used to be a soap opera model. He's got the gray hair, young guy, good looking guy. He's a phenomenal salesperson, got a bunch of books, right? Well, in order for him to learn sales, he actually went to improv classes because what sales is sometimes is improv. You got to be able to think on your feet. You got to be able to overcome objections to what Jody said before on your feet with sometimes a limited amount of knowledge and to be able to talk to with competency and certainty so where the customer can make a decision. At the end of the day, what sales associates need to be doing is becoming as prepared as possible for all scenarios. And, in this environment, there is downtime in our stores, even though we don't want it to be. What are we going to do to turn that downtime into profitable time? Well, guess what? Role playing and being prepared for that customer is super important. And I'm going to take it one step further. I have a lot of like sayings that I kind of live by. A body at rest stays at rest. A body in motion stays in motion. I know a lot of people right now are experiencing downtimes in the economy and a little bit of a downtime in the furniture business. Well, if your sales associates are waiting around all day for the next up, they're going to see that up as as an obligation, excuse me, not an opportunity. But if you can keep your sales associates in motion, in gear, role playing, when that customer comes in, their bodies are already kind of warmed up. They've already kind of exercised that philosophical muscle and they can go out there and talk to the customer. And so role playing is something that should be done every day around any kind of skill that you feel like our stores can be doing better in real life practical application scenarios. But I will caution you, if it's always serious all the time, role playing will only be opportunity. or excuse me, only be obligation. You got to make it an opportunity by having a lot of fun with it too. And so do the improv classes, do the craziest scenario, and find ways to interject a lot of fun into role playing so that way your sales associates can kind of have fun with it and actually want to do it.
That's I love everything about that. Just you're 100% spot on. It may be a day where you're seeing one up, two ups. How do you consistently do that? There's a question that came in. I think this goes back to the question you said, Jody, about the system and training to the system. A question that came in was, how do you handle a high performing salesperson that does not follow your sales process?
Is that to me?
Yeah. that'd be good.
Okay. I would say, first of all, one of the things that I've done is that I've made my sales process into a checklist, and it's a checklist of actions to achieve an intended outcome in each step. Each step has an objective, right? So for instance, asking discovery questions, the objective of that step is to have enough information that in the next step you can make a powerful and compelling presentation, right? And it's all actions. And so I think that sometimes top producers have strong enough egos to get them to be a top producer. And it is likely that if you took the checklist and observed them, most of the stuff that they're doing is on the checklist. But they just want to put their stamp on it. They don't want anybody to tell them what to do. They've achieved it by their own grace and good looks and all that other stuff, right? But the fact is, it's not that. So that it's likely that that it's more in line than it is than it's out of line. But also is there something that they're looking to achieve that's a motivating factor that they would be interested to explore what might be missing from what they're doing that would make them perform at an even better level than they're already at, right? And to make them the things that they are doing that are in sync with the organization, to make them leaders and examples of that. And so that they get the accolades and the appreciation for what they contribute, for what they are doing that's similar. But I would just say that there's probably more that they're doing that's similar than not.
Michael, you mentioned earlier on the keep it simple. And you mentioned make sure that there's the milestones or the components, but keep it agile. Is that what you would suggest? How would you handle this particular situation of a how a salesperson that doesn't actually follow the process? And it could be one of two things. It could be maybe doesn't follow the steps, maybe dances to their own music a little bit more. How would you handle that?
So to your point, you have to start by observing if what they're doing is detrimental. Probably not, since they're a high performer. Generally speaking, no matter how good someone is, they could always be better. So one angle of attack would be looking at their performance, identifying some areas where it could grow, and doing the math equation to determine exactly how much money that would be. If your average ticket is X and your close ratio is Y, and we grew your close ratio this much through these behaviors, this is this amount of money. Another thing, a little bit to Jody's point, you start to enlist those people in huddles. You enlist those people in things like role plays, and you basically use them as the example of the right way to do it while giving them the scenario where they perform it in the right way. And you're calling out to the rest of the team that this high performer does it the right way while tricking them into doing it the right way. They may adopt it. But one of the biggest techniques I've used is what I said before. It's kind of like, if you're so good, why aren't you better? You're doing very well. I am sure you want to do better. So let's get to how you can do better without ever sounding like you're picking apart how they do it or downplaying how they do it. Again, you come with the kudos and you identify ways to improve upon it and give them specific behaviors and specific math for how much better they could do it. It's so easy to use sports cliches, but unfortunately, I'm going to do it. All the best hitters, all the best pitchers, they're still practicing 365 days a year. They always could get better. A prime example is Hank Aaron. When Hank Aaron first came into the league, he swung the bat with his hands upside down. He held them in the wrong position on the bottom of the bat for what handed he was. Someone made the change, and he became one of the greatest hitters of all time when he was already a really good hitter. Just a small little change. He had been doing it the wrong way. He was doing well despite that, But look how much better he was once someone identified one small change because he had learned it wrong. I don't think anybody said, "What the heck's wrong with you, Hank?" I think they came at it from a place of love, like how much better you could do. Same thing with our high performers. Identify those opportunities, point them out to them, and then kind of lean on them, use them as an example.
I love that analogy there, Mike. I'm going to steal it and pretend like I made it up. So one thing that I wanted to do is just top spin and just I believe in something called limiting beliefs, right? And so it's something that Tony Robbins talks about a lot. And so when we look at it inside of our stores, we say, okay, well, we have the number one performer in our stores. Does that necessarily mean that they're a top performer? I want everybody to think about that as an abstract because okay, you could be the, you could be the greatest in your store, but I mean, okay, what's the person up the street doing? What's the person in the other city doing? What's the best person in the region doing? And so there's a strong possibility, right? I mean, there's only one number one. Who has that? We don't really know. But for the most part, when you have a top performer in your store, they hit this proverbial glass ceiling, and that's where they stop because they're outpacing everybody. And so what I've found is that if we can give somebody else for them to chase, a new enemy, they go after it. Okay, and then you give them reasons to do that. Michael Jordan, another sports reference here, Michael. We're gonna do another one. Michael Jordan, every single time he walked on the basketball court, he found an enemy. Even if there wasn't one, he found an enemy. And so typically high performers are two things. They're either extremely money motivated or ego motivated. You got to find a way to placate to those two things, right? And so if they're a high performer, letting them know that they're the top dog here, but they're not the top dog in the entire, field may ignite something. Okay, here's what the true best of the best of the best are doing. They're calling people after they get delivery to see if there's anything else that they need. They're calling all of their customers that have, entered in their funnel, but we're entering them back into the funnel with utilizing some follow-up techniques. We're introducing social media and we're creating a platform. We're introducing themselves as a expert in design or an expert in, home furnishings in this particular region or territory. Have they gone, worldwide with their influence in terms of selling furniture? And so I think what we have to do for our top performers is make them realize that they're the top performer with this glass ceiling. What happens when we remove it? And so I think it's a slight changing of ideology, asking a slightly different question and looking at things at the abstract, as opposed to being confined into our box of our own furniture store. So think a little bit bigger and get your top performers to look outside of that box and to think bigger with you.
If I could add one thing in the same vein, for anybody who's on this call that has, more than one location or even within a location, I highly recommend that you have bulletin boards and you have bulletin board material, aka you show the top performers within the company per category, per KPI, and you can change it week over week. Something our company does is we have a weekly sort of a newsletter. We call it the Knowledge Nook. But we show the top 3 in some categories, top 5 in others, and then we also will post those top performers at different times, their best practices, their testimonials on how they do certain things. So to Rob's point, if somebody in location A wants to chase down someone in location C that they keep seeing is better than them, and then they see them sharing testimonials and best practices that we specifically pick because we know they're doing it the right way, it's another way to get them to model the right behavior.
Something that I love that you touched on, Rob, was around motivation, and something that we discussed a couple weeks ago in part one was there was a little bit of conflict amongst the panelists around the idea of intrinsic motivators and extrinsic motivators, and the idea that from an intrinsic motivation standard, which is actually the larger driver of most people, it's really just about finding out what makes them success is dependent on them, where it's not always money, it's not always um, uh, competition that drives motivation. So maybe both Michael and Rob, you can answer this question. When you're actually setting goals, how do you balance ambition and individual motivations with realism so that the teams do stay motivated, but they're also grounded?
One thing that I do, it's a really good question. And honestly, this is something that I could do a lot better at, to be completely honest with you. And it's kind of hit me close to home because I feel like we've been moving so fast with our business that we've left the blinders on a little bit and we've lost sight of this. And so this is something that we've talked about, ad nauseum over the past couple of weeks. But Simon Sinek, everybody's seen the book, everybody's heard from this guy before. Start with why. And one thing that we used to do years ago, and we're going to start doing again, is a dream board. And so to your point, right? I mean, what are they there for? And I always go back to this question. When you were first hired here, and I ask this if somebody's there 10 years, 20 years, 5 months, 5 days, doesn't matter. When you were first hired here, what goals and dreams and aspirations did you have for this job? Like, why did you get this job to begin with? I understand you probably left a bad job, or maybe this is your first job, but when you had your first day, you were probably doe-eyed, super excited about the opportunity. And what did you want, the next 6 months or year to look like for you? What were you looking to achieve? And just asking that extremely basic question to go all the way back to when they first started and what did you want to achieve in their first year or 2 years? What was your goals and why did you want to reach those goals? Was it to get your kid in a better school? Was it to buy a different car? Was it to buy your first home or your second home, a vacation home? Right? All of these things are important information for me to build a dream board for them. And so we used to have lockers, right? Back in the old days, when I was working in a big box showroom, and those lockers would have all their cell phones and purses and things like that. And on the front of their locker on a random day, I would print out a picture of whatever their goal was, whether it was a boat or the school they wanted to bring their kid to, or a vacation to Hawaii or Alaska. I'd put a picture of it on there. And they would be like, "Who put this picture on here?" And then I say, "Well, I did." And, "Well, why?" "Well, because you promised me when you first started here, this is what you were going to achieve. I just wanted to remind you of it." And it kind of regrounds them to think, because everybody, it doesn't matter what it is, it could be your job, your relationship, it could be anything, right? You get into a routine and you lose sight of all of that ambition. And so what I try to do is to be a small little domino, a small little catalyst, a spark, whatever you want to call it, to help jumpstart that ambition again toward what really drives and motivates them. What drives and motivates me, I can guarantee you, most likely is probably different than what it is for Michael and Jody. And what drives and motivates them is probably going to be different from us. We all have very specific things that have happened in our lives and are happening today and happened yesterday and are going to happen tomorrow that really and truly drives our behaviors and motivations to do what we do. And so on a very personal level, even if you have 40 or 50 sales associates on your floor, you should be staffing to the point where you can have those very pointed and important conversations with your staff members and interject that like Jody said, we have two customers. We have the customer that buys the products from us, and we have the customers that serve our customers, which is our sales teams, our managers, our customer service representatives. And so think about that as well. So if I can align their goals with what they actually want and show them a proven process to help them get to those goals, I'm going to get a lot more buy-in and trust, to Michael's point before, in what they're doing.
I would just add, when it comes to the rep level goals, and assuming that you're having your reps make some of their own goals, when you said balance realism with sort of pie in the sky goals, I think it's important to keep it relatively realistic and rein it in by going at it in a two-part format. Like, when someone gives you a goal, if they can't immediately say how they will attain that goal, they're probably just flinging a number out, and that cheapens the goal itself. If they're constantly giving you pie in the sky, they're probably being flippant or not taking it very seriously. So you maybe narrow down the quantity of goals they make. As opposed to making 7 goals, you keep them to 3 goals. It's always beneficial if 2 of those 3 goals build to the 3rd goal. You make a mountain out of multiple molehills. You make a big success out of a lot of small successes that build towards that big success. And just as Rob said, it comes down to why and or how. Why is that the goal, and how will the goal be attained? And make sure we keep that grounded in the discussion so that we aren't sort of throwing out crazy stretch goals. I believe in having a base goal and a stretch goal, but I don't believe in the base goal being outlandish for most people. Back to high performers, there will be folks that can say something that's pretty wild, and they can get there, so you allow it to happen. But for most folks, you want to make sure they're attaining successes that you can see, that you can give them recognition on as you build towards bigger successes, not just throwing out a bunch of craziness.
Can I add to that? So one of the things that I started doing a few years ago, because I was working with a team, and one of the performers she was doing okay, but she could have done better, and she had started to decline. And she said to me, I'm starting to have to go into my savings. Or they start to say, I think I need to get another job or a second job, or I don't think I can make enough money here. And what it had me do in my goal setting process is to create a basement goal. There's the standard that you have to achieve to keep your seat on the bench, whatever that standard is, whether it's behavioral or revenue, whatever it is, monthly, quarterly, whatever that is whatever that is. But then the basement number is a calculation, and it's what your income needs to be for you to meet your fixed and variable expenses every month. But you're not making a life of a luxury until that's passed that's in the rearview mirror. So that the company could say, you got to stay, you have to hit 50,000 every month to stay on the team. I'm making up the numbers. Your goal to hit 1 million is 84,000 a month, but your basement goal is 78,000. Like, you can't go below 78,000 paid unwritten in order for your life to work, because calculated at 6%, that's what you need to, and less what you need to deduct. That's what you need to bring home every month. So and I've had some owners say, well, it's not really my place to do a course in financial literacy. It's like, this is their income. Like, you can't talk about their income in one place on goals and then not talk about it in the reality part of it. I'm not asking them how they spend their money. I'm saying, what do you need to bring home? And at 7%, this is what you need to write. And the reaction is usually, that can't be right. That's like way too much. It's like, no, it isn't. That's what you need to make. Now, that's the basement, but let's say 78,000 is your basement goal, but you might have a goal of 100,000, because for your life to work the way you want it to work, it's more than that. So understanding what motivates them, what the numbers actually mean in the money, really matters when we put a finer point on it to understand what it means to them. And as Rob said, is it a boat? Is it a car? Is it a better car? A reliable car? Like, what does that actually mean? Because the number itself, unless it's only competitive, the number itself is what it's going to buy them that matters, that their life without it isn't as great.
I 100% agree with you, Jody. I'm going to just add just a tiny bit to that. So going back to my opening statements when I was asked one of those questions, ups, closing, average sale. Those are the only three ways to make money, right? Transaction count's a component of opportunities and closings, right? And so what I like to do, to Jody's point, is I like to break it down into cliffs. If their goal is unrealistic, the last thing I'm going to tell them is that the goal is unrealistic, right? I'm going to say, okay, fantastic. I love that goal. We're bullish on goals. Let's find out exactly what it takes to get there. And let's start creating these thresholds, these points, these checkpoints, right? If I'm running a race, if I'm running a marathon, there's going to be checkpoints. There's going to be places where I could get water. I'm going to recharge. I'm going to get some fuel. I'm going to continue to go down this path. And so how many ups, if I'm going to have a goal of $100,000 in sales, how many ups do I need to have with a 20% closing ratio or whatever our standard is? That's going to equal my transaction count. My current average sale is X. Okay, fantastic. If I want to get it from 50,000 a month or to $100,000 a month or 70 to 100, whatever the number is, well, okay, I got to increase a couple different things. I either got to increase my opportunities, how many people I'm talking to on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. I got to increase my closing percentage. Going to go to 20 to 21 to 22%. That's just going to increase my transaction count. And what can I do from an add-on perspective to add more value to the conversation so I can get my average sale from, again, making up numbers, $1,000 to 1,200 to 1,500, right? And so it's all about these thresholds. And I'd like to show mathematically what they need to do in bite-sized chunks in order to achieve it. Because even your top salespeople will see an up come through the door. They just sit down for lunch. We always know that. You want to get more customers through the door, buy lunch. That's all you got to do, guys. Just keep lunch coming in every hour on the hour. You'll get more customers. There's something about it. But, you'll have that salesperson think, oh my God, I just sat down for lunch. My lunch is going to get cold or my salad's going to get soggy or whatever it is. But if you say, hey, listen, the more ups you take and you show them you're only at 3 ups today, you got to get to 10 ups today, they're going to look at that and say, well, you know what, that up, even if they don't buy, that's helping me get to my 10 because I know eventually I'm going to get to that one that buys, that additional one. You see what I mean? And so you have to put metrics in place to Michael's point that are realistic, that are attainable things, and then you're going to step them all the way up, even if that unrealistic goal is out there. There's absolutely a mathematical way to reach every single goal out there. And even if it's perceived as not possible, if we continue to strive for it, chances are we're going to be doing a heck of a lot better than what we're doing today. And so break it down to the bite-sized chunks, show them how many ups they need to take, what their closing ratio needs to be, transaction count, and average sale, and show them mathematically how they can reach their goals in those thresholds that Jody was talking about.
Rob, when you say even if something is unrealistic, do you find that unrealistic goals have to do with the forecasting techniques used, or more so the process that the salesperson's using. And regardless of what answer, what have you found for forecasting that's been the most effective for predicting performance, especially across multiple locations?
Past performance is obviously the biggest indicator of future performance, right? Um, but in terms of realism, who am I to say what's realistic? When you got people like, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos out there and people like Todd Wanick, I mean, if somebody sat down with those guys originally and were like, oh, come on, man, be realistic. You're not going to sell cars. You're not going to be able to, shoot rockets into outer space. And they took that advice. Like, could you imagine the change in the world, right? And so for me, there's a mathematical possible way to get to every single goal, regardless of what it is. You want to do $1 billion in sales? Fantastic. There's companies that do $1 billion in sales. You're not going to be able to do it by yourself. You're not going to be able to do it in this store. Let's take a look at what it looks like. Let's start building that funnel. You're going to need X amount of locations. You're going to need X amount of people. Let's take a look at what it looks like. But we got to get our sales to, at least our sales to $50,000 this month in order to get to $1 billion, right? So we gotta start someplace. We got to understand where we are. And I will say this as a manager, as a leader. You can have the most beautiful vessel in the world, but if the captain doesn't know where it's going, it's completely useless. And so goals are important. If you're going to put goals out there that are lofty, you just got to create a plan in order to get it. And chances are just about everything is realistic. Now, obviously there's things that are not, but in the confines of what we're talking about in terms of sales and performance, I believe that if you put a plan in place, you put goals out there, you can mathematically show how many customers you need to get, what your closing ratio needs to be, what your average sales needs to be, and your transaction count needs to be. You just got to spend more money to get those customers through the door. You got to train your people better to get that closing ratio and transaction count. And you have to have a compelling offer on your floor to get easy add-ons. And chances are you'll be able to get there. But you got to look at the business. And I think this is one thing that a lot of people don't do. And I think everybody here would agree with me. We spend so much time working in the business. The day to day is what's happening, the customer flow, the problems, the knocking over Mrs. Jones's mailbox and ripping up her floor and delivery, that we never spend enough time working on the business and what's actually realistic. Because previous performance is always a great indicator of future performance. But you know what? I've fired entire staffs and have seen the store sales double immediately because they set that proverbial glass ceiling. So it's a really hard question to answer without really deep diving into what's happening in your store, what's happened in the past, and how do we make the changes in order to achieve, better results in that location.
I would just add, as Rob said, past performance is always a good indicator. Of course, you have to look at traffic patterns. You have to anticipate. You have to look at what's going on in the present, what happened in the past. You have to anticipate what's going on in the future, which of course is tricky. But you must never forecast stagnancy if you can help it. I know sometimes we forecast being flat because we anticipate stagnant traffic or whatever. But to Rob's point, in order to keep marching forward and not bump up against that glass ceiling, we sort of have to always forecast at least a moderate bump in productivity. Even if we're not forecasting a moderate bump in traffic, we have to come up with the process that we're going to emphasize to get that moderate bump. But forecasting, there's a lot of forecasting tools out there. I would wager most folks on this call use something. Obviously, CRM systems are a great thing because you can look at the traffic patterns most recently and sort of extrapolate. You can look at what you're doing with them. There's many different reporting systems to examine, your year over year, your decade over decade. And you have to be very active in examining those things so you can try to extrapolate. And you also have to be nimble because sometimes you have to change or course correct what you forecasted because you see that, a monsoon came through, a tornado came through, snowmageddon came through, and you change your forecasting accordingly. But there's a saying that I can't even describe who it comes from. A goal is just a hope until you write it down. Forecasting is you building towards those goals and you trying to extrapolate how quickly you can get there and how much you can beat them by. While it is extrapolation, you have to consistently and constantly do it and be nimble and keep re-examining it so that you are building towards improvement rather than a glass ceiling or rather than a drop. Some folks plan for a drop, they plan for a loss, which is just bad planning, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one additional detail that I left out of that beginning one, in terms of forecasting, a major metric that I think a lot of, especially the smaller, more, mom and pop style furniture stores they'll spend money on advertising and they'll just throw it out there, but they'll never really categorize what that was and when it was and how it happened. And all of a sudden you're looking at last year's sales and you recognize you did 100K for a couple of days and you're like, well, what happened there? We get a big sale. You're deep diving into data and you're like, I have no idea what happened. But if you're really forecasting your ad spend and you're matching it up as a percentage of sales, well, then you could try to duplicate that performance, or to Michael's point, not try to just duplicate it, but beat that by potentially spending a little bit more to get more people through the door. But you can look at your previous offer. I think advertising previous offer, and your marketing campaigns, is a huge indicator. And then obviously you have different market conditions that could potentially going in there as well. You got a monsoon, you got a snowstorm, whatever it might be that could dampen sales for any one given time period a week. But if you have a CRM system or you have something where you're logging that data so that way you're really comparing apples to apples is super important, because comparison really can be sometimes the thief of joy. If you're not looking at things as they actually are and with all the facts and data, well, you can kind of get yourself in a downward spiral by not really matching things up to what they really were the previous year and what you actually did. I mean, if I spend $20,000 in a month for a particular store on advertising, and I'm planning on spending $5,000 this month at the same time, just last year, I could not expect to have the same performance, but I could potentially make more money because I spent less money on advertising. It all depends on how you really, plan out everything in your documentation process.
I'm going to add one more thing to that it's, um, while we're looking to the past, because the past, as both Rob and Michael said, is a great predictor of the future. And the future's scary and we don't know. But as an industry, the home furnishings industry has not been cutting edge when it comes to creating the future, right? Other industries have done a much better job than we have ever done. And yet there are people, Jordan's Furniture was one of the best when it came to creating what they want people to come to, right? And so when we look at the future and look at what technology is going to be doing, what customer buying habits are going to be doing in the face of e-commerce taking retail business away from us more than a brick and mortar competitor down the street is doing, it's like, I'm going to use it as a sports analogy, as Wayne Gretzky would say, go where the puck is going, not where the puck is. And so where is the industry going? Where are buying habits of the customer going so that we can be there? Are we using AI effectively? I know that when I looked at the market events, the educational events and speaking events at this past market, 50% of them were AI and technology driven. To start to look at where is technology going to take us and what kind of business are we building for how people want to shop, not how we want to sell. How do people want to buy so that we can be where they want to buy and be anticipating some of that to be ahead of the curve and not trying to catch up once everybody else gets there. I don't know what the answer is, but it's one of those, as Rob said about working on our business, are we asking the hard questions about the future and not just duplicating the past? Not that either of you said that. And not just regurgitating what we've always been doing because it's easy and it's safe and it's the business we know. What's the business we don't know that's the business that's on the horizon?
This has been a really good conversation. I think I could easily spend another hour because we only got to about half of what we wanted to actually start and talk about. But I want to sum up all the major points that I heard today because I think they tell a really interesting story. Rob, you started this conversation saying there's three things to look at. There's basically traffic or opportunities, there's the close ratio, and there's the average transaction. And Michael, you said it's our job to keep them, even if it's unreachable, it's your job to move the target forward. And Jody, you said in the sales process, your first step is plan. And so to take these 3 points, I think the question that we have here, we have sales managers on the call, and sales managers are asking the question, how do I be sales manager better? Or how do I do sales management better? And I think that's part of the formula that we're talking about. If you're clear about what the future's bringing or what the current's bringing, you're clear about what's moving your needle and what you're focusing on. If your goal is to move the target regardless, and you're coaching on different opportunities, then you have to plan on what you're coaching for. You have to go in with your own 7-step process or your own 5-step process on training management. How are you sales training your team? How are you prepared in the future of an opportunity where that might be less traffic to prepare your team and enable them for that? And so we have literally 1 minute. If I can get like just one brief thing to wrap this up, just one takeaway from each of you to leave everyone on the call with just one actionable step so they can help drive sales results, just maybe through effective process or planning, what would it be, just briefly?
Be brave. Be brave. Like, look where you don't want to look. Be brave, be courageous, and really start, and then read the tea leaves and go in that direction. Put the structures in place to support where you want to go, that is the future where it's going, and put the structures in place to achieve it. Because I'm with these two. Anything's achievable if you put the structure in place to do it.
Right.
I would add, for all the sales managers out here, develop your brand, your mission statement, decide what type of leader you're going to be, and then do everything else flowing outward from that. It should adhere to the core values, the company culture. But if you decide that if you decide that you're going to foster success, and that is how all of your team will perceive you and how all of your team will interact with you, if you hold yourself accountable to that, you'll hold everybody else accountable to the right things.
Yeah, and so my quick sentence, and I could talk about this for hours too, obviously, is define where you're going. You got to tell your team where we're going, where are we headed, where are we rowing this boat? We're all in the boat together. Where are we rowing it? Define your goals, define where the thing is going, and never change that, right? Iterate, iterate, iterate. Create your plan. Work the plan. If you're finding that you're moving a little bit left or a little bit right, you can iterate. You can change the plan. The plan changing is fine, but the goal should never be changed. And don't settle, right? We are all built for, what I believe to be greatness. God would not give you a goal, not to get biblical. God would not give you a goal if it was not meant for you. And so don't change the plan. Don't change or excuse me, you can change the plan, but do not change the goal. Continue to strive. Like Jody said, be brave, work the plan, work the goal, and let's see where we end up. But don't sell yourself too short. There's a lot of opportunity in this marketplace.
Rob, Jody, Michael, thank you guys all so much for sharing your expertise. And for anyone attending today, thank you for attending. We do want to thank Synchrony again for sponsoring and all of our webinars. And specifically today, our Ignite code is SUCCESS25. That's SUCCESS25. Get those points. And make sure to register for our next webinar. It's on Thursday, June 5th, and it is managing cash flow fluctuations during turbulent times. So hopefully we'll be prepared for some good insight there. Until then, please keep inspiring your teams and driving towards excellence. And thank you for tuning in, and thank you for trusting HFA to help advance and support your business success. Take care.